Brilliance Audio presents Rainshadow Road by Lisa Kleypas. Performed by Tanya Eby. When Lucy Marin was 7 years old, 3 things happened. Her little sister Alice got sick. She was assigned her first science fair project, and she found out that magic existed. More specifically, that she had the power to create magic. And for the rest of her life, Lucy would be aware that the distance between ordinary and extraordinary was only a step, a breath, a heartbeat away. But this was not the kind of knowledge that made one bold and daring, at least not in Lucy's case. It made her cautious, secretive, because the revelation of a magical ability, particularly one that you had no control over, meant you were different. And even a child of 7 understood that you didn't want to find yourself on the wrong side of the dividing line between different and normal. You wanted to belong. The problem was, no matter how well you kept your secret, the very fact of having one was enough to separate you from everyone else. She was never certain why the magic came when it did, what succession of events had led to its first appearance, but she thought it had all started on the morning when Alice had woken with a stiff neck, a fever, and a bright red rash. As soon as Lucy's mother saw Alice, she shouted for her father to call the doctor. Frightened by the turmoil in the house, Lucy sat on a kitchen chair in her nightgown, her heart pounding as she watched her father slam down the telephone receiver with such haste that it bounced off its plastic cradle. "Find your shoes, Lucy. Hurry." Her father's voice, always so calm, had splintered on the last word. His face was skull white. "What's happening?" "Your mother and I are taking Alice to the hospital." "Am I going too?" "You're going to spend the day with Mrs. Geisler." At the mention of their neighbor, who always shouted when Lucy rode her bike across her front lawn, she protested. "I don't want to. She's scary." "Not now, Lucy." He had given her a look that had caused the words to dry up in Lucy's throat. They had gone to the car, and her mother had climbed into the back seat, holding Alice as if she were an infant. The sounds Alice had made were so startling that Lucy put her hands over her ears. She shrank herself into as little space as possible, the humid vinyl seat covers sticking to her legs. After her parents dropped her off at Mrs. Geisler's house, they drove away in such a hurry that the tires of the minivan bruised the driveway with black marks. Mrs. Geisler's face was creased like a shutter door as she told Lucy not to touch anything. The house was filled with antiques. The agreeable mustiness of old books and the lemon tang of furniture polish hung in the air. It was as quiet as church. No sounds of television in the background, no music, no voices or telephone ringing. Sitting very still on the brocade sofa, Lucy stared at a tea set that had been carefully arranged on the coffee table. The tea set was made of a kind of glass Lucy had never seen before. Every cup and saucer glowed with a multicolored luminescence, the glass adorned with thickly painted gold swirls and flowers. Mesmerized by the way the colors seemed to change at different angles, Lucy knelt on the floor, tilting her head from one side to the other. Mrs. Geisler stood in the doorway, giving a small laugh that sounded like the crackle of ice cubes when you poured water over them. "That is art glass," she said, "made in Czechoslovakia. It's been in my family for 100 years. "How did they put the rainbows in it?" Lucy asked in a hushed voice. "They dissolve metal and color into melted glass." Lucy was astonished by the revelation. "How do you melt glass?" But Mrs. Geisler was tired of talking. "Children ask too many questions," she said, and went back to the kitchen.